I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the March 2nd Board of Commissioners meeting. Our chairman, Commissioner Bob White, is not here tonight, so I'll be acting as the chair conducting the meeting tonight. First, I'd like to ask if Commissioner Beaumont would lead our invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening in preparation for our county commissioners meeting. And Lord, I pray that you would give each commissioner on this board the wisdom as we look at the issues before us. Father, that they would see impact today, tomorrow, for us, for our children, for our grandchildren. Father, I'm reminded that this evening is the eve upon the ability to vote in our county and our great state. Lord, many of our brothers and our sisters laid down their lives since the creation of this country for the ability for Currituck County to exercise your right to vote. Lord, I pray that you would rise up in the citizenry of Currituck County, that they would exercise that right. Father, for it is easy to complain, but Lord, I pray that you would give people the wisdom to exercise, to go out and vote and participate. Lord, we ask you to bless this evening, bless this meeting, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Beaumont. The next order is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any amendments to the agenda, or can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. Okay, next we're going to have public comment. I don't have anyone signed up on public comment that I see here. Is there anybody that showed up that would like to speak in public comment? See? I think they wanted to talk on a topic. All right, seeing no one signed up for public comment, we'll move into the commissioner's report, and we'll start with on this end with Commissioner Jarvis first.
Thank you. As a retired civics teacher, I would just encourage everyone to get out tomorrow and vote. In the primary election in 2018, our voter turnout was a mere 18%. That means 82% did not voice their opinion in the last primary election. The more participation we get, the better government we get. I firmly believe that. And that means the more people that vote, the more accountability we have. And so I would say be informed, be heard, get out and vote. Thank you.
I will ditto what Commissioner Jarvis said and agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McCord.
Next. I'll ditto what Commissioner Jarvis said and ditto what Commissioner Etheridge said. One thing there was the early number voting was up from 2018's numbers from the State Board of Elections website. So as long as that was correct. But like you said, people like to complain. So like you said, get out and vote. So you earn the right to complain.
Thank you, Commissioner McCord. We'll go to Commissioner Kitty Etheridge next.
Ditto.
Okay. And Commissioner Beaumont.
Okay. I agree. Ditto as well. That's all.
Okay. Well, lastly, myself, I guess, just ditto everybody else up here, but did want to make one public announcement. I was asked to present this tonight that the beach parking permits are now available at the Moyock Welcome Center and the Corolla Visitor Center. You can do the applications online if you like at parkingonthebeach.com, or you can go to any of the centers to get the application. And with that, that's all I have to say tonight. And next on the agenda is our county manager's report.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, sir.
All right. That being said, next we're going to go into public hearings. First item of public hearing is PB 1925, Currituck County and Currituck Station, a request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 1, General Provisions, Chapter 2, Administration, Chapter 3 Zoning Districts, Chapter 4 Use Standards, Chapter 5 Development Standards, Chapter 6 Subdivision Infrastructure Standards, Chapter 10 Definitions and Measurements for the purpose of implementing the Moyac Megasite Master Plan Currituck Station and establishing the planned development Currituck Station District regulations.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to continue this item until April 6th at our regular Board of Commissioners meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Jarvis. For a second.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carried. So we'll move that to April 6th. The next item is PB 20-1, McDonald's Corporation request for a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 5 Development Standards and Chapter 10 Definitions to allow the installation of fully electronic menu board signs associated with drive-through lanes. And with that, I believe we have Jason Littoral presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. McDonald's Corporation has requested an amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 5 Development Standards and Chapter 10 Definitions to allow the installation of electronically controlled menu board signs that would be associated with drive-through lanes only. The current ordinance has standards that limit the amount of electronically controlled signs to 50% of the total sign area, so you can have basically half of your sign be electronic. And this amendment proposes a new category of signs called menu board signs, and those would be allowed under this amendment to have up to 100% be electronically controlled. And you may have seen these at fast food restaurants around. Staff recommends the following standards for these signs. Up to 100% of menu board signs area can be electronically controlled. Menu board signs shall be associated with an approved drive-through lane. Menu board signs shall not be used for additional advertisement to off-site views and shall be for the sole purpose of conveying menu information to patrons in a drive-through lane. Menu board signs shall have a maximum area of 60 square feet and a maximum height of 8 feet. And the applicant has agreed to staff recommendations. The requested amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the 2006 Land Use Plan, including Policy ED1, and the request is reasonable and in the public interest because restaurants with the drive-through lanes are an allowable use in the general business zoning district. And digital menu boards are reasonable requests since the technology is typical for new and redeveloped businesses. I have a picture of one here. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, next I have public hearing. I have no one signed up for public hearing on this. Does anyone in the audience that may have come in late wanted to have any comments on public? Yes, sir, if you can come on up and state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Haywood. I am an attorney on behalf of McDonald's Corporation. The address is 5410 Trinity Road in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm pleased to be before you tonight as the applicant to start this process and very much appreciate staff, especially Jason's ability to work with us through this process. McDonald's has been rolling out through the entire country some new menu reader boards to be able to better assist the public and be able to process through drive-through lanes on a quicker basis. Since everything in society is going faster and faster and faster, we now are to the point of that also impacting drive-through lanes. And so that's what this is. I was telling Ike McCree a minute ago that fortunately McDonald's through the country has been, like I said, trying to go through this, and they have reached 99.9% approval, and guess which county is left? Yours. And so that's not to say that there was a reason why you have not gotten to the board. It's just that through the process we had to go through a text change amendment, which is why we're here tonight. to be able to get that instead of doing it through some type of staff level. So I'm here to answer any questions, but everything that Jason said is correct. We agree with all the staff recommended changes to the code in terms of your definitions section, also adding a menu reader board, but it's pretty straightforward in terms of what we're looking for. But I very much appreciate your consideration tonight, and McDonald's would request, after your consideration, to agree to amend the text change to allow this in Currituck County. We have one restaurant in Grandy, North Carolina, where we're looking to be able to establish this, so this is not something that's pervasive along the Outer Banks. We just have one restaurant that we're aware of, but this will apply to all restaurants. It's not just specific to one particular chain. It would be any particular fast casual restaurant.
Any questions from the board?
Okay,
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from board members? Okay, no other questions, then I would ask the board for a motion.
I will move to approve the text amendment as submitted by the staff.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Commissioner McCord second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
The line like they do it. Chick-fil-A.
All right, next on the public hearings is PB 1927, QHOC of Windswept Pines, driveway width and setbacks text amendment. The request to amend Chapter 5 of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow driveway widths of up to 40 feet when located on the street with curb and guttering section and where the allowable lot coverage is not exceeded. The amendment also proposes to revise Chapter 3 to reduce the driveway setbacks from the side property lines to 5 feet as opposed to the current requirement of 10 feet. And I believe this is a continuation from our last meeting, and Laura LaCicero will be providing information on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue before you tonight, we discussed in one of your February board meetings, and there are two separate issues in this text amendment. The first is a driveway width at the right-of-way. The applicant is asking for that it could be up to 40 feet at the right-of-way. We're back to it can flare out. Right now, our requirement is 24 feet. It can flare out as an apron once from the right-of-way line to the street, or once it's back further into the property line, it can be widened to as long as it adheres to the setback. Since the February meeting, NCDOT did comment on the 8 driveways that brought this issue to the forefront, that brought it to our attention, and they have accepted the deviation from the 8 existing non-compliant driveways. You do have, I believe the county manager forwarded you an email dated February 8th from David Otts, saying that those 8 overwidth driveways already installed will not hinder the department from accepting the roads in Windswept Pines for addition to the state system once petitioned. However, they do not encourage a text amendment to allow that greater than 24 feet at the right-of-way throughout the county. Once again, that greater than 24 feet would exceed their standard that is listed in their policy on streets and driveway access in North Carolina highways. But once again, the issues for those 8 driveways have been resolved with that email from DOT dated February 8th. The second part of this text amendment is essentially a setback reduction. Like I said, when the driveway goes into the property, it can be widened to exceed that 24 feet as long as it adheres to the setback, the side setback. Currently, our side setback for driveways is 10 feet. The applicant is requesting that side setback be reduced to 5 feet. And you have a memo from the county engineer, and he's here tonight if you have questions for him, but that there are areas with no stormwater system that the side setback reduction could have more impacts because driveways have long linear stormwater capabilities. In our UDO, we do allow deviations for things such as steps, eaves, overhangs, things that are more transient in nature that aren't permanent there. And I believe Mr. Weatherly in his memo did give you for instance, that a 100-foot driveway could have an impact of approximately 150 cubic feet of increased runoff. So staff does recommend denial of this text amendment request due to the concerns that were expressed by Mr. Weatherly and the planning staff, and also with DOT weighing in about the 24-foot width. We do suggest recommend denial of this. However, the planning board recommend denial of the 40-foot width. They did have an issue, or they voiced a concern that to keep the side setback from the side property line for driveways at 10 feet, but can be reduced to 5 feet with an engineer certification that the encroachment will not negatively impact drainage on neighboring properties. So that's kind of a summary of where we were, what's happened in the interim since you've heard this in the February meeting until now. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have about any of this.
If I may, I thought we were keeping them separate as far as like the driveways and then the I didn't know it was all one. Isn't that what we talked about last time?
The board can make a motion to approve one section
Okay.
or the other, deny the whole thing, approve the whole thing, or split them apart.
Okay. That was my, thank you. So it can be done that way.
Any other questions from board members?
Yes.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Did I understand correctly last meeting when we said PRDs have no setback on their similar situations?
PDRs.
What did I say, PRDs?
Yeah.
PDRs.
They can set their own setback in their master plan and in their terms and conditions. So they would be able to have a setback based on their lot size, their minimum lot size, and things like that. Because in a PDR, you have the flexibility to have a varied lot size. So then you'd have a varied lot width depending on what your minimum lot size is for your planned development.
So what is the difference between that and what we're talking about?
Well, I think at this point, this would be countywide, and it would be impacting not only these newer developments that have stormwater plans and lots of stormwater infrastructure, but it would also impact older subdivisions, older residential neighborhoods, all residential neighborhoods that may not have the extensive stormwater infrastructure that some of these newer neighborhoods have. And I believe Mr. Weatherly did focus on that in his memo that was part of your staff report.
Page 265 and 266.
Got it up right now.
Any other questions from board members? If not, at the last meeting, we decided to reopen public hearing for this item, and with that said, I'll open public hearing, and I had one person signed up, I believe Mark Bissell, is that correct? I saw Mark but no last name, so I just assumed it was, okay, so.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was writing my name when I was told that I didn't actually need to sign
Okay.
up to speak.
Okay.
So that's why only half of my name is on there, but thank you for the opportunity to come up.
Yeah, that's what.
As Ms. LaCicera said, the planning board did recommend that we try to find ways to accommodate some of these situations and provide remedies to these situations for some of these existing conditions, and recommended that the county consider allowing engineered letters, evaluations, and so forth that would be taken into consideration on specific cases to allow some of these encroachments to remain. There are 3 that I'm aware of right now. One that our client has over in Windswept Pines, which is a 2-foot encroachment into a setback on an open space lot that has a stormwater pond, where there would certainly not be an impact. And there are a couple of driveways that we're aware of over in Moyock Crossing that have, where you've actually seen pictures, I think, in your packet that show that those are adjacent to swales that are shallow in subdivisions that have the condition that county engineer talked about, where you have mass grading plans and centralized stormwater management plans, where in situations like that there would probably not be an adverse impact on the neighboring property. And he's kind of and I agree that this wouldn't necessarily be a good thing to have just a blanket approval on, but I think that what the county engineer has outlined, allowing a reduction in a driveway setback to include an engineered sealed plan illustrating how the runoff would not adversely impact adjoining lots, would be something that you could consider.
But correct me, I guess, Lord, the last meeting here, we haven't come across this issue before, and a couple of the individuals that came up and spoke last week made the comment that they had their driveways poured and all that after everything was approved. And
Yes, some of these were approved,
yeah,
or they had the work done after the initial, their initial site plan and the initial house was built.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What do you, if you said something, I'll bring down. You said there's a 3-foot setback to an open space lot. I mean, does that, you think encroach?
2-foot encroachment.
Say that again, like a 2-foot.
It encroaches 2 feet into the 10-foot side yard setback, and the adjacent lot is an open space lot with a stormwater pond. So there actually is no swale; it just kind of goes downhill to the pond.
Mr. Cicero, what is the most egregious offense or offender we have on the 10-foot setback right now?
We have some fairly egregious where they're like 5 and 6 feet into the setback and it's not just these 3 that Mr. Bissell spoke of.
No, thank you, Mr. Bissell. No, countywide. I'm trying to get a handle on how, because a blanket, you get to go 5 feet in with a stamped engineer, is not the ideal solution. But I'd like to know how bad it is.
The worst, and we're back to this, a lot of this work was done after the final CO. They come in, they bring us a site plan for a shed or a pool, and all of a sudden we see that there's concrete within the setback. The worst one that I know is about 7 feet into the setback, so there's only 3 feet between the edge of this concrete and the property line. And this was, once again, that work was done without a permit, and then the homeowner came in to, I believe, get a building permit for some decking. And this was brought to our attention at that point. So that's fairly significant, and that one is in an older neighborhood without any stormwater infrastructure in it.
so, Ms. Cicero, then an existing development throughout Currituck County, wherever that might be, if this passes, could potentially come in and now ask to have a driveway closer to their neighbor if they get an engineer to come in and approve that it won't affect them, even though the neighbors bought the land and there was a 10-foot easement. This would allow them to go into that if it gets approved. Would it be?
If that's the language, if you want to go with the planning board recommendation,
It would allow that.
It would allow that,
So some of your neighbors that were used to that 10-foot now could be reduced to 5 feet.
correct.
So then the next question is, maybe I don't want my neighbor's house, 5 feet closer, or his driveway 5 feet closer to mine. So then the question is, how do we protect the person on the side?
Is there a remedy for them if they don't want it?
Not with this.
So there's no remedy, if we pass this, there's no remedy for an adjacent homeowner who opposes this?
There would be no remedy for them.
Okay, any commissioners have any other questions?
They could put a concrete driveway, they could put a paver driveway in between them and the property, is that correct?
No, our parking areas and driveways, because they are fairly usually significant, they have to adhere to that 10-foot setback. We do allow things such as patios and steps and some decking, eaves, and those type of things to hang over. No, that would be impervious. Now, if it's landscaping stone, that's different.
No, I'm talking about like gravel. Gravel's pervious.
Our interpretation and our understanding is that if all gravel and parking areas and driveways have to be adhered, the 10-foot setback, has to adhere to a 10-foot setback, is the way we've,
Thank you, Mr. Bissell.
Well, if I could make one other comment, and that's that the allowable setback encroachments in your rules of measurement in Chapter 10 are porches, decks, patios, steps, sidewalks, and similar site features, and they're allowed to encroach 3 feet for impervious site features or 5 feet for pervious site features. So I guess to go more than 3 feet, you would need to use
So if
porous pavement of some kind.
So if we had it reduced to a 5-foot setback, would there still be a 3-foot exception, so someone's fence could be right on my property? We still going to have that exception?
well, it depends on what which version the board approves,
Okay.
but possibly.
Okay.
Any other question?
I'd like to talk to Eric.
Okay.
I would do on the setback.
Could Eric, would you mind coming up and answer us a few questions on this?
So let me just say that we'd be okay with just, amending that section of the rules of measurement to include that with the language that county engineer has proposed to make that, rather than being universal, being case by case. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we had a few questions for you, Mr. Well. Ms. Beaumont? Ms.
I always had heard or understood, and this goes back to the world of trees and horticulture, that like crushed stone, crushed rock, pebbles, mulch, that's all considered pervious or is permeable. So do we consider that impervious?
We do. We consider gravel driveways impervious. Now, if you want to get into, excuse me, the size of the stone, let's say you got crusher run, a lot of fines, impervious. What if you had pea gravel or something like that? Maybe some of that's impervious, but
How about the pavers that actually have, you see it a lot now in the Outer Banks, where it's a paver, they use it for driveway, and the centers are hollow, right?
Right.
Is that considered impervious as well?
we allow a reduction
Okay,
in the percent coverage.
okay. Do you all know what I'm talking about?
Used to Ramada Inn parking lot.
Yes, yep,
The actual parking pad is solid, but the space in between them
right.
Right.
is that open block.
So this is some of the things that we could be talking about with if you do allow it, then an engineer needs to come in and say, I'm going to use this, this is how much reduction in coverage this will account for. So that's kind of one of the things you could allow with the engineered sealed drawing saying. But like I said the last time, even with these permeable pavers, porous concretes, you're still going to get runoff in a heavy rain. And that's really why these ordinances were put in, to prevent that runoff, even with these permeable pavers, from going on your neighbor. Because it still will run off.
Like Mr. Bowman said, the turf stone pavers, the ones you see at the beach all the time, where they cut out the area, they put them in there, and then they cover them with some kind of pea gravel or whatever kind of stone.
Right.
I mean, so that is considered permeable or not?
Partially.
Partially.
Yeah, but also you got to think about soil type. There's some soil types that are not permeable.
Well,
Yeah. But then you still got that encroachment going towards your neighbor, though, closer. That's the concern, I
That's the
think.
difference.
I just wanted to kind of clear one thing up, if it's all right with the board. The letter from our engineer, Mr. Weatherly, it states that the engineer recommends that the setback amendment be denied. If you want to approve something, here is the best language he would recommend. Because Mr. Bissell's kind of saying that the county engineer recommends this language. Well, that's his first recommendation is for denial. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
And aren't we having a lot of issues with neighbors complaining about flooding?
We are. We just got out of the workshop about that, didn't we?
Yes.
How overworked our stormwater technician is.
Any other questions for Mr. Weatherly? Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Any other questions from the Board of Commissioners on this matter? If not,
I'm sorry,
go
one
ahead.
final question. So, folks that have an issue, do we have any remedy for them? If this is denied, then they're considered to be non-compliant or non-conforming. Can they go to what are their options?
Well, they would be deemed non-compliant with the ordinance. They do not have a legal nonconformity because they put this surface in place without proper permits and in violation of the ordinance. I do not think this would lend itself to a variance application before the Board of Adjustment because I don't think on its face it could meet the elemental requirements for a variance to be issued. So really the only remedy would be to remove the offending area of driveway from the setback area.
Could they quit claim deed 2 feet to their neighbor? I got a question though. Do you have to get a permit if I want to add on to my driveway at my house? Do I have to get a permit to add on crushed concrete? Because I've never heard of one of those, but we just said that you did.
Yes, you should. I mean, lot coverage is such an issue in this county. We would require.
And I'm just yeah.
And there's lots of people who don't know that, and we're not. It would be brought to our attention if you bring in a site plan for something else. We're not going to go.
I don't need any more,
the,
not me.
Okay, but we don't have the staff time to go out and looking for specifically for driveway encroachments. It would be, most of these were brought to our attention for another. They came and got a permit for a shed or a deck or things like that. And that was brought to our attention that you've got these other violations on your property that have happened within the last year or so, and we cannot issue a permit because you have a current violation on your property.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And if there's no other questions from the board, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Last question. How many permits have we, off the top of your head, have we ever issued for a crushed concrete driveway?
Off the top of my head, I really don't know.
Have
But
we ever? I'm just curious because I would have thought you wouldn't needed one.
yeah, I mean we have, but
Okay. Because I have people ask that question all the time. I'm like, I don't think so. Call Tammy. So,
Mr. Chairman, did we
Yes.
actually open a public hearing?
We did.
Because we were discussing it among ourselves.
No, I opened a public hearing and I had Mark's name on there. So, yes, it was opened earlier. So I am closing it now, though. So if there's no other questions from the board on this, I will open the floor for a motion.
And I move to deny PB 19-27 because the request is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the 2006 Land Use Plan, including Policy TR12. New residential developments shall provide for the installation of paved public roadway and drainage infrastructure at the time of development. This policy is intended to prevent the creation of substandard developments that must later correct for infrastructure problems that could have been avoided had they been installed properly from the beginning. Family subdivisions and non-asphalt roads serving the northern beaches are the only exception to this policy. And the request is not reasonable and not in the public interest because it is unclear if existing curb and gutter systems are capable of preventing floodwaters generated by increased impervious areas and potential increased velocity from negatively affecting neighborhood properties and streets. Reduction of the side setback for driveways may cause issues with flooding of neighboring properties by reducing space available for stormwater infiltration, limiting the space available for property line swells, encouraging fill in the 10-foot setback when grade changes are necessary.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, any further discussions?
can I ask a question on her motion? Is that as them combined as one? Because I wanted to deny one part and approve one part.
My motion is for both, to deny
Denial
both.
for both.
Yes.
And we have a second from Commissioner Etheridge. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, the motion carries 4-2.
I don't have that in my notes. Took the driveways in. They took the driveways in.
Yeah, I was like Kevin.
We thought it was together. That's why I asked that question. If they were the driveway with NCDOT put in.
The
I
eight
was good with
driveways,
that
yeah.
part. The setback part, I was against that part.
The driveways, we talked about the driveways being taken into the NCDOT system, right? That was one of the first.
Yes, that was the email from David Otts from
Yes.
February 8th.
And Commissioner McCord, you referring to, I think there were some individuals who were trying to pull a pool permit.
Yes.
Their driveway was accepted by NCDOT and therefore became legal, and they were able to pull that permit. So that situation resolved itself through the NCDOT accepting.
I just thought I asked that question at the beginning if they were together. I'm good.
There's no way anybody can come back on them.
Our ordinance says that it is acceptable if NCDOT approves a deviation for that deviation to occur. NCDOT has approved that deviation. If at a future period the ordinance is ever changed to remove that language, they would be legal nonconforming. So I can't guarantee their lot is totally legal in every way, but for the driveway width at the right-of-way, if it ever changed, they're legal now, and if it ever changed, they would be legal nonconforming.
I'll ask the county attorney, is it possible we can change our vote?
Only if someone who voted in the majority moves to reconsider.
I move to reconsider.
Okay, we have a motion to reconsider the vote. Do I have a second? Okay, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Okay, so I guess I'll ask for another motion on PB 1927, Windswept Pines driveway and setback text amendment.
Do you want me to read it again?
I believe she has to read
Yeah,
the motion.
go ahead.
Read the motion.
Here we go. It's okay. I move to deny PB 19-27 because the request is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the 2006 Land Use Plan, including Policy TR12. New residential development shall provide for the installation of paved public roadway and drainage infrastructure at the time of development. This policy is intended to prevent the creation of substandard developments that must later correct for infrastructure problems that could have been avoided had they been installed properly from the beginning. Family subdivisions and non-asphalt roads serving the northern beaches are the only exceptions to this policy, and the request is not reasonable and not in the public interest because it is unclear if existing curb and gutter systems are capable of preventing floodwaters generated by increased impervious area and potential increased velocity from negatively affecting neighborhood properties and streets. Reduction of the side setback for driveways may cause issue with floodings of neighborhood properties by reducing space available for stormwater infiltration, limiting the space available for the property line swells, encouraging fill in the 10-foot setback when grade changes are necessary.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion from the board? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item, consideration and action, PB 8-42, Academy Security Training Facility Use Permit Renewal. Request to renew the use permit for the security training facility located at 850 Puddin Ridge Road, tax map 12, parcel 1, and tax map 17, parcel 1A, Moayak Township. The use permit is due to expire March 15, 2020. This is a judicial matter, so anyone wanting to speak on this, please come forward to be sworn in. Come up to the podium, please. And put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Okay, with that, we will turn it over to Tammy Glaive.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Just to remind the board, Academy, they were Academy when they got the use permit, so you will hear me referring to them as Academy as we talk. How do I use the pointy thing? Big round thing?
Yeah, it doesn't.
But it don't show it up there. Okay. See, there's a line that you can see running diagonally through the site plan, and that's the separation of the Camden-Currituck line right there. Lori's got it for you. So the only portion that we are considering is a few shooting ranges, and there's also a portion of a driving track in Currituck County as well. So it's not the entire facility and all of their buildings and all of their activities. So in the original approval was granted by the Board of Commissioners on March 2nd, 2009. Since then, the request has been renewed a couple of times because what the board wanted to do was get an idea to make sure that they're operating in compliance, which staff has found through inspections they're continually in compliance, and to make sure there were no unforeseen circumstances. So the board to this point has renewed this at 5-year intervals. The conditions on the use permit, that there are no munitions storage in Currituck County, and there's not. The firing ranges have very giant signs that are posted. Let me see. Each range is posted with the munitions that can be shot at that range and the rules and procedures for the range. That was one. That picture was actually taken today. They have copies of the most recent military handbook on site. It's I want to say 2017 or 2018. No activities will occur past 10 p.m. at these ranges, and that operation is prohibited at these ranges on Sunday. So the Board of Commissioners, like I said, has limited in increments to this point to make sure that Academy is a good neighbor, that they're operating in compliance. They've been in compliance for the past 10 years, and it is staff's recommendation that the use permit be continued without an expiration date. and it will, what we say, run with the land, it'll then run with the land. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
What range numbers are in Currituck County? Do you know, or is that maybe going to be a question for?
That's a question for somebody else, but I can tell you at least none of 35.
I just and maybe this might be a question for the applicant as well. The time shooting for Camden, I think, is later, if I'm not mistaken. 10 o'clock. Okay.
I'm not familiar with Camden's.
Didn't always stop at the county.
Yeah.
Yeah, it amplifies sound and pushes it.
And they do have regular inspection. Sounds like we're out there all the time, but since they're a use permit, they're inspected periodically to make sure that these things are in compliance.
Any other questions for Ms. Glade? If not, I'll ask if the applicant would like to come up and speak.
Thank you.
You want the map up?
Good evening. My name is Kate McKenzie Veal. I am senior counsel for Constellus, which is the parent company for Academy. So I'm representing the applicant here, and I completely forgot your questions, Commissioner McCord. You asked about the range numbers.
Yeah, how many range? I believe
It's 4.
Yeah.
It's 34 through 37. Is that 4?
Yeah.
Yes. And then, as you can see, that part of the track. And the times are the same for Camden. It's
What about Sundays?
7 a.m. I think Camden might allow
Let 'em shoot
Sunday
on Sundays.
shooting.
Does the
If
track
somebody
have
calls-
you're entering Currituck and you're leaving Currituck as they get there?
Yeah, it's
You
got
know,
a
we
welcome
actually
to the
took the sign down even on the main road, but that would be pretty funny for all the law enforcement to
Welcome
see
to
that. As they,
Currituck.
yeah.
now entering Camden County. Turn 4.
Happy to answer any other questions that you have.
That was all. Just like I said, I do believe Camden allows to shoot because we have, and I mean, as my other capacity of sergeant with the sheriff's department, we get some complaints, and I believe Camden is allowed to shoot on Sunday. So, yes. So that's I always just say they're shooting in Camden.
Do you have any other questions for the applicant? If not, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for public hearing. And I only had one applicant, which I believe, or the applicant signed up. Is there anyone who didn't sign up would like to come up and speak on this? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public hearing, and I'll ask the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move to approve PB 08-42. Academy has operated in compliance with no violations or valid complaints in the past 11 years, and I'll motion to renew this use permit without expiration date.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Ms. Glade. Next on the agenda is new business. Consideration for approval of contract shoreline stability study, and I believe that is our county manager. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, like she said. That's a mouthful, yeah. This is a contract that was actually presented at the retreat that the board kind of had a chance to look over. This is for the shoreline stability study. The board gave direction to staff to extend this all the way from the county line at the southern end to the county line or state line on the northern end. So this would take in the entirety of our coastline. It would occur over a 3-year period. And the county engineer is here to answer any technical questions that you all may have about the study. But essentially it's going to take from the western side of the dune, study the dry beach, and then study 2,500 feet out into the surf. And it'll compile that data over 3 years, see how our dry beach is changing, see how our dunes are changing, see how the sand that's being held offshore is changing. They're also going to do a grain analysis of the sand so that if at any point Currituck County ever did have a desire to go into some kind of nourishment project, we've got that data in hand. We are recommending that we do the optional, which would be the bathymetric surveys for year 2 and year 3, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
No questions from the board, then I'll ask the board for a motion for approval.
Motion for approval.
Second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Carries unanimously. The second item is contract amendment, Southern Disaster Recovery Notice to proceed, and I'll turn that over to our county manager as well.
Thank you, sir. This is a approval. You actually have already approved this contract previously, and you gave a not to exceed price. As they were doing the grinding, they exceeded the price by approximately $54,000. So from a FEMA standpoint, we have to clean that up. This is coming back before you, basically just to amend it to go to that, to increase the not to exceed price to the amount that was actually spent. This is the company that actually picked up the debris and got rid of the debris for us. Just as kind of a side note, I know there were some questions about the debris pickup. Most areas of the county had debris pickup that occurred within 3 weeks from whenever we initiated the contract. So, like I said, this is really just on the back end as they grind. They're not sure how many cubic yards they're going to actually grind. They get a better count as it grinds, and then they get rid of the airspace in between. So we also have our emergency manager here, Mary Beth Noons, who facilitated the contract if you have any questions.
So what is the total amount not to exceed?
554.
I've got on page 307, it's 554,000. Is that right?
That's correct. So we increased it to 500,000 for them,
Okay.
and then the extra 54 is there.
All right, that's all I needed to know. Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to make you
Count
walk all
those
the way.
steps.
Any other questions from board members? If not, I'll ask for a motion from the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item under new business is board appointments. I believe we have the Fire and EMS Advisory Board. We have Mr. Hart, Chief Hart, is going to be coming off, so we need a replacement for him. And I believe we
Michael
have,
Hurt. Michael Hurt.
Okay, we have an appointment. Is that a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Michael Hurt is currently the chief at the Moyock Station, and he has been at. There may have been a meeting that he missed, but he has attended about every Fiat meeting that we've had since he's been appointed as the chief of the Moyock Township. So my nomination is for Michael Hurt to run.
Second.
All right, motion second. Any further discussion on this? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item is a consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? None heard. Ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And with that, I will adjourn our commissioners meeting, and I'll ask for a motion to open the Special Tourism Development Authority. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Motion, I'm sorry. I thought we had a second. I'm sorry. My fault. Motion to
Second.
adjourn. I apologize. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? And now we'll go into the special meeting of the Tourism Advisory Board Authority. Ask for a motion to go into that meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. With that, I'll turn that over to our county manager. Or
Yes, sir. I'm going to actually just turn it right over to our tourism
okay.
director.
Okay.
All right, thank you for having me here tonight. What I want to bring before you tonight is some grant funding for some great new events that are coming up in Currituck. So on Tuesday, February 18th, Tourism Advisory Board Chairman Bob White, Ben Steichleather, and myself met to look over these grant funding requests and make a motion for you guys to consider this grant funding. So in total, we had 7 applicants and 9 events. So I can go over those with you. Just to recap, total grant funding each year is capped at $100,000. So that's what we have in the pot. No one can be awarded more than $20,000 for an event. 6 tab members scored each application separately. So we actually have a scorecard. And the total of number of points that can be awarded individually to each event is 50 points. So we have 100,000 in the pot, 20,000 to each event, and no one can score more than 50 points. So based on the aggregate scores, the TAB is recommending grant funding for the following applicants. The first that scored the highest is Coinjot Ruritan Club. And before I go into this, does anybody have any questions about the different criteria that we look over? Because I did bring the score sheets in case anybody had a question. So what we're looking at is tourism development as one section, which is 25 points, and the event evaluation, which is another 25 points. So that's how the scoring occurred. So Coinjot Ruritan Club for the Currituck Wildlife Festival scored 47.33, and they were requesting $15,200 for the Currituck Wildlife Festival. The TAB is recommending full funding for that. The second was Bearded Face Productions for the Mustang Rock and Roast. That's in its third or fourth year, I believe. They scored 46.33. They were asking for $20,000, and TAB is recommending full funding. The Currituck Master Gardeners for their 2020 Flower and Garden Show are asking for $3,451, and the TAB is recommending full funding. Sanctuary Vineyards actually had two events. The first one is Crab Daddy, which takes place in the early fall, and they were asking for $2,500, and TAB recommends full funding. The Wildlife Resource Center for Outdoors Day was asking for $9,600, and the TAB is recommending full funding for that. Knott's Island Ruritan Club actually has two. They're asking for $19,875 for the Peach Festival coming up in 2020. TAB is recommending full funding. They're also asking for $10,273.61 for the Peach Festival that took place in June of 2019. And it was recommended by the board that we look at some retroactive funding for last year since we put this into place rather late. So the Peach Festival is looking to recoup some of that money. And they did turn in all of their receipts and justifications for that. So the TAB is recommending full funding for that one. The second for Sanctuary Vineyards is the Trucking Food, Truck, and Wine event. And last year was their first event. And on Saturdays, they have a different food truck come in. They have some wine, they have food, and they have some music. And it's an attempt to get people off the road that are coming in. And they've experienced some success, but are looking for a little bit of funding to help them build up this event. And most of that money is going to bands, to the hiring of bands. They're asking for $7,000, and the TAB is recommending full funding. Our last event is the Pig Point Kayak Fishing Tournament from the Currituck Chamber of Commerce. This is a new event. They requested $20,000, and TAB is recommending $8,000, which is partial funding. Some of the items that they were asking were non-eligible expenses. So the TAB looked at that and decided that they couldn't fund those. So that is actually everything. Total grant funding for this year would be $95,899.61. So what I'd like for the Board of Commissioners to do is consider that and decide whether they would like to grant this funding.
Can you say the total? You said 95 or 98?
95,000.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly can they use the money for? So the public would be
They can use the money for anything but our non-eligible expense. Is probably easier to look at that way. A non-eligible expense, for example, is a cash award, because you can't give taxpayer dollars that way. Now, they could opt to ask for money to buy a prize that they give away, but non-cash cash awards are not allowed. Management expenses are also not allowed, administrative. So the intent of the grant is not to pay you to put on an event, but to give you money to help with the expenses, like, for example, entertainment, You wanted to hire a band. Facilities. You needed a venue. You need to rent a venue. Paper products, things to help you organize. Anything that helps you with the event. Posters, billboards, postcards, print ads, radio, online advertising, all of those things. Now, the grant will, if you approve it, the applicant will enter into a contract with the county. So there will be a contract. And they, in order to get the money, they will have to turn in receipts not to exceed their grant. And they have to be expenses that are allowable. So once they turn in the receipts, we check it, make sure that it's an allowable expense. We will reimburse them, but they actually have to put the money out first. Then they come back with their receipts and we'll reimburse them. And that can start at the very beginning of the event or before the event, as long as the contract is signed. So we'll be keeping track of that. And at the end of the event, they will have to turn in a reconciliation form. So we'll have everything in a neat little package. So that's the way we set this up.
And after the event, they'll have where they'll tell you if the event was successful.
Yes, they have to turn in, first of all, they have to tell us in the original application what they expect. And the event has to draw in more than 50% of the attendees have to be from out of county. It has to be an applicable tourism event. So at the end, they need to tell us or approximate how many people came from out of county. They have to do an accountability form. So they'll have some reconciliation to do at the end so that we can evaluate how that went. Because if they do come back next year and ask us for additional grant funding, we'll be able to look at that and decide if it was a viable program.
So this is telling the public that we're taking this money, trying to get more tourists into
Yes.
our county and using it for tourist-related activities.
Yes, it's for tourism-related activities. And the tourism department, we already put on a lot of events. So this is an opportunity for some of our nonprofit organizations and our businesses to put on events to attract tourists and take some of that onus off the tourism department, just in terms of sheer manpower. But we will be there to make sure that everything is running smoothly, that we're collecting the receipts, and we're also there for them as consultants. So if they don't know or they want to know what's the best radio to use, or what do you think from a print ad standpoint, what would be our best venue? Would it be the Virginia Pilot or the Daily Advance? So we'll be there as consultants for them. Well, you all helped us get that going, so thank you very, very much. And the tab, I'd like to just say thank you for the tab. They put in a lot of long hours. So did Chairman White, and so did our county manager, Ben Steichleather. It was a process. Thanks to Dare County, who have a grant funding program in place already that we were able to look at and steal from. Flattery is, stealing is flattery. So we're very happy to at least have some models and then modify it along the lines that we chose.
So something like the Peach Festival, when they come in, I mean, most of the people come, there was people came from, I was at it last year, from Newport News, as far as that away. I mean, are they, like, if you sell tickets to an event, you fill out a ticket, Paul Beaumont attends it, and I mean, does he have to put, just for an example, I live in such and such, I mean, are they, just to...
I think they're looking at cars. There also some of them will be collecting zip codes. Zip codes are our best and easiest form to collect information because we can take zip codes and put them in a spreadsheet and sort them and find out where most of the people are coming from. That's really our best avenue. And if they don't have a point of entry where they can do that, the best form is looking at cars and looking at license plates. But they are required to put into place something that will allow them to measure the attendees and where they're from.
Any other questions for Ms. Krug?
Oh, thank
If not, I'm going to go ahead and ask the board to act on this item, ask for a motion for the tourism grant funding awards.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion second. Any other discussions? If not, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I guess the second item is the budget amendments.
Yes, sir. This budget amendment is basically the contract that you approved earlier for the shoreline stability study. This budget amendment moves money from occupancy tax into a multi-year fund so that that cost is covered.
Move for approval.
Any discussions? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Carries unanimously. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn from the special meeting and move back into our general commissioners meeting. Have a second?
You already adjourned.
I'm sorry. Adjourn the special use meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.